Hello, everyone. It's quite strange because I obviously can't see you guys. You can see me. So my name is Amy House. I'm the burial ground manager at Eden Valley Woodland Burial Grounds, which is in Kent, on the Kent-Surrey border. So we're natural burial grounds. We have opened in 2015. So we have been going about 6 years now. And we have almost 500 funerals now, so we've had a fair few. That includes ashes and full interments, so we take both at our site. So what I'm going to do is have a quick chat with you about kind of what natural burial is, the funeral process, how it works. Oh, sorry, that's the work phone. I'm just going to turn that off. Challenges we have. Sorry, I should have done that beforehand. Always busy. So we're going to talk about what natural burial is, the funeral process, how it works, challenges we have with natural burial, and then particular to us, our vision for what we see as Eden Valley Burial Ground, what we see natural burial as, basically. So I'm just going to put the presentation on. Bear with me while I share my screen. I've got some nice examples. Bear with me 1 sec. Okay, so here's a photo of kind of our natural burial grounds in Kent. Oh, and like I said, if anyone has any questions, just put them in, and Victoria's gonna stop me, and we can take any questions kind of as we go through. So this is a picture of our natural burial ground, which, like I said, is in Kent. The key things about natural burial, for anyone who doesn't know, is that obviously it's an environmentally friendly way of burial, and in simplistic terms, it's when a non-embalmed body is placed in a hand-dug grave at a depth of around 3'2", in an environmentally friendly coffin, and there's no marker.
I was just sorry. I was jumping in to say we can't see your screen at the moment.
Oh, you can't. Oh, that's very strange. I thought I screen shared it. Sorry.
That's all right. That's it.
Oh, I need to come back here and do it.
Yeah.
It's not more technical than I realised.
Sorry.
Oh, no, it's not at all. It's just I'm being really... Yeah, how about now?
Yes, perfect. Yeah.
There we go. So now you can see the picture of our burial grounds.
No worries.
So like I said, so that's simply what it is. So to break that down a bit further, the reasons why those things make a natural burial. So obviously embalming is, for those of you who don't know, it's a very invasive process. It's a very toxic process. It uses formaldehyde, which is not good for the people using it, and is not good for seeping into the ground, which is why we say that we don't take embalmed bodies. From my understanding, it's actually very interesting. The history of embalming is to do with the Civil War in America, when obviously a lot of people died quite young and they needed to be moved across the country. So that's when embalming kind of really took hold. And then it's almost been a thing that we have done that in a lot of cases is unnecessary, as far as natural burials considers it. But it's one of those kind of things that we just keep doing. So for natural burial, we don't do that anymore. The grave is hand dug. Obviously, the reasons for that are pretty obvious. No machinery. It's very natural. I've got a lovely example of a hand dug grave here. During COVID this year, my husband actually couldn't dig, and we had to get a digger in. And you would not believe the difference in a hand dug grave and a natural grave. A hand dug grave is so much more beautiful. It's shaped to the size of the coffin. You can see there's another photo there. That's my husband and my son digging quite a square grave. So that must have been a very kind of squared off coffin. But you can see the sharpness of the lines. It's just a really beautiful part of it. And I guess that all goes with natural burial as well. The way it looks and the feel and the return to the earth. The burial depth we do is around 3'2". I mean, the legal proposal is you're supposed to have about 2 foot of earth on top of a coffin. And the reason to do it hand dug are firstly because it is, the reason to do it that depth is firstly because it is hand dug. It's better for the digger. As soon as you get any deeper, you have to start shoring up, and obviously it's more dangerous. And the second reason is to do with the decomposition of the body. So at that level, there's still supposed to be aerobic decomposition of the body. so the body will decompose more naturally using aerobic bacteria, whereas if it goes deeper, then it will be anaerobic, and that releases methane, which again, you know, is bad for the environment. So that's why we tend to do single depth, and most natural burial grounds, to be honest, only do single depth graves, for those reasons. And then environmentally friendly coffins. This is a really interesting one. I was just listening to a lovely talk from the Dorset coffin lady. This is actually, I think this is the photo on the screen at the moment. This is a Suffolk willow coffin, or Sussex willow, sorry, I should say. So environmentally friendly coffins are things that, such as wicker, willow, cardboard, normally post-consumer waste cardboard. You can have hard coffins, but they need to be from sustainable forests. Then there's a whole bit on coffins around coffins that come from abroad, such as, I believe this one's a bamboo coffin in this photo. And there's a lot about, is that environmental? Should that be included in natural burial? But some of the coffin suppliers we know support local industry in places abroad, pay proper living wages. So it's kind of supporting an industry over there. But that's a question, you know, how environmental is it? But the ones abroad that we recommend are as environmental as you can get when moving them in. And then the final thing, obviously, to do with natural burials is no marker. So this is one of the trees we planted. It's a crabapple or a wild cherry. I think I can't see the leaves. So yes, so it's one of the, so that's what we do. We plant trees on top. So our natural burial ground is kind of building a woodland. And that's one of the things that I think differentiates different natural burial grounds. Our natural burial ground is very much around, we are building a woodland, we are rewilding. We're not a cemetery with trees, and that is a big thing for some people. And different natural burial grounds do allow markers and do allow different things, and they are still, you know, planting trees, and it is still more natural because the way they're doing it is more natural. But the end process sometimes can feel like a cemetery with trees, whereas here, obviously, it will be a woodland, a natural woodland. So one of the big concerns is kind of where are the graves? So this is a beautiful picture of our site. One of the first summers. Our site's about 20 acres, so it's massive. So even though we've had 500 graves, you know, we're right up that top corner still, so you can't see it from this photo where we're burying people. But what we do is all sites tend to be kind of grid marked out. So here's an example of kind of what a map looks like. So these maps are kind of kept in the office, and then on each of these corners of this red square, there's a marker in the ground. And those are the markers that are used. So no one is ever lost. Everyone is always known, even if there is no actual kind of official marker with their name there. So how we do it is the markers are 12 meters across. So you get kind of these squares, and then anyone who's buried there, the family would get a map with reference to these particular grid points, so people can always be found. And then on top of that, they tend to have areas. So this on our burial ground is called Ingrid's Coop, which is after the first lady who bought a plot there. But the most important thing to know is no one is ever lost. Yeah, but we always know where everyone is. So just thinking about kind of the practicalities of what it means to have a natural burial ground. There are those practicalities. There are the way, you know, the way things are done, the non-embalming, the environmentally friendly coffin. But what I think is we're most passionate about with natural burial is the fact it is about those things, but the other side of it is about the essence of it, which is the ownership of your own funeral and the time and space to do what you want at your own funeral. We only do one a day on our site. You have the site for the day. You can start as early as you want. You can finish as late as you want. And that can look very, very different at different funerals. And it doesn't have to look different. It can be a very normal funeral. It can be, here's one we had with a horse and cart, and the coffin arrived on a horse and cart. Here's another one we had when the coffin arrived in the back of someone's car. So it is a complete kind of journey from the different ways that people want to do things. And that's the biggest thing I feel that is part of our job when people come to the site, is to help them understand that the funeral can be their own. And like I said, the essence of natural burial is around, you know, not only the process, the way it's done, but it's also around people being able to do kind of exactly what they like. So here's some photos. This is quite early on of a very traditional funeral, which we do obviously have at the site with pallbearers, traditional funeral directors, everything. That's obviously all possible, and it's totally on people's own choice, compared with these two ladies who actually looked after their mum at home. They did what we call a DIY funeral, which is obviously great for people who either want that level of ownership, but also, you know, for money as well. And then they just looked after her at home, and then they ordered their own coffin, popped her in the back of the car, and brought her down. And they even took part in the process of burying someone, in burying her. And that's another thing with natural burial, because the graves are hand dug, and because we do have the time there. We're not kind of waiting there with the grave digger. Natural burial, the family can get involved in the backfill. And we've even had families come along and want to dig the graves as well, and we find that's very cathartic for people. It can really help, even if it's just covering the person over. I think that's a really lovely thing that often people do, that you wouldn't get at a normal cemetery necessarily, when it's, you know, done with a big digger. When someone has the opportunity to see someone kind of safe and enclosed in the ground, that's a really powerful thing. That's something I want anyway. But it just feels really nice. And then often the family will stay there the whole day and do the whole backfill, which is quite nice for them as well. So how it kind of works on a natural burial, just kind of the process of it. So we have a hand bier on the site, so all cars are left in the car park, and then the coffin is pulled up the site on a hand bier. People do any combination of things. They sometimes do a church service, they do the whole service on the site, sometimes they put up a marquee. So it's completely open to all different options. You can see a lovely photo there. So that's the track on our site. So kind of people leave stuff at the car park, leave the mechanical stuff, and then part of the journey of the site is kind of the walk up. And most natural burial grounds have this. There's a lovely photo of a family actually pulling the cart and, you know, pulling it themselves and walking up the site, which is kind of a part DIY funeral, where they do that. So obviously at our site, we do what's called a tree planting. So how this works for us, the trees can only be planted at certain times of the year. So at most natural burial grounds, you have a tree planting ceremony, and when you invite all the families back, and then all the families can take part in planting their own tree if they like, if they want a tree. On our site, we have a number of trees. Most natural burial grounds who kind of are proper natural burial grounds use you know, native trees that give something back, and also trees that have a second use, such as one of the most popular ones we plant is a hazel tree, because that obviously lives for about 300 years, has food, and also it can be coppiced. So it's always thinking about, the big thing about natural burial is it is a second land use. It's a forest, and it's a burial ground, and it has another use for coppicing. So thinking about how it's looking after its future is a big thing with natural burial. So you can see it's lovely. So it's a really nice time for people to kind of come back and be able to have a look at the site. I just wanted to read this to you because I think this gives the essence before I go on to kind of some of the challenges. But this kind of encapsulates, I feel, what natural burial was. So this was a comment from one of the parents of someone we buried. So first, may I say, and you can quote me, in all my over 40 years in church leadership, conducting many, many funerals, I have never experienced such a helpful event. Your simple care and consideration in facilitating us in very traumatic circumstances was pastorally very helpful and sensitive. You were helpful in letting us feel our way and thinking through what we might want with a very positive can-do attitude. You also made suggestions in this as possible, but do not think you have to do it way, which for us was very freeing and helped us in our planning. The way you facilitated Benjamin, my son, in the digging of the grave was amazing and so beneficial to him. Your oversight of the day was very careful, clear and unobtrusive, and obviously the unhurried availability of time for the funeral was wonderful and so helpful in the grieving process. Put this in contrast to the half-hour slots at a crematorium, or even the possible hour at a cemetery, with the grave diggers hovering in the background, waiting for you to go so they can get on with their job backfilling the graves in the time they have allotted to do. Says there's absolutely no comparison with the woodland burial, providing so much more helpful environments. Also, the openness to explore different ways of making the event helpful for the mourners is another asset to your facility. We had a very spiritual event, which was strongly Christian in its expression and felt very comfortable, but you can be helpful to people of all faiths and none without feeling uncomfortable. I could go on. The availability to your site, your sensitivity when we needed time on John's birthday, and not even raising an eyebrow at the presence of Benjamin's camper van and brewing up cups of coffee. Again, from a position of considerable pastoral experience, I want to say thank you and will recommend you wherever I am in a place to do so. So what I found really lovely about that is he was a pastor who was used to doing funerals and he'd never experienced a natural burial. And I think for him, it felt very freeing for him. So that was a positive thing. So just stop the slides now. Oh, I come back to the event. So basically, I just wanted to have a quick chat now about some of the challenges we have about running the natural burial ground, and then on to kind of what our vision is. Now you all know how it works. So natural burial is sometimes a hard concept for people to get their heads around. And one of the biggest challenges we have is often family members struggling with it, because it is about the fact that they're burying someone somewhere where it doesn't feel normal yet. It is getting more normal, but for lots of people, they want that kind of mark on the earth that said that person was there. And that is something that people struggle with, which is why we always encourage conversations like this event, these conversations happening now, which allows people to introduce their families to different ideas at an earlier time, which is really important, because we have had people come to the site and then they haven't done a natural burial, but even though that's what the person specifically asked for, because they just couldn't get their head around it. But I feel that changing, which is great. I feel sometimes we are unpopular with funeral directors, perhaps because we do take more time. I think the more open-minded funeral directors, there's a list of those kind of recommended on the Natural Burial Ground websites. They see the value and they give the options, which is great. And I think it is becoming more of a thing. But I mean, it is obviously, it can be muddy, it can be dirty, it can be wet, it can take a long time. And all those things are part of the beauty of it. There's also, I think there's some misconceptions with people about burial in general. For some, it's very important, but for some, I mean, the questions we often get asked are things about, well, the worms, I don't want to be eaten by worms, or, it feels very cold down there. But actually, I think graves are very warm places, and actually the more understanding and people see graves, is a very different experience to what people think, or people are concerned they'll be dug up by something. But when you've spent 4 hours digging a hole, I think you realise actually how hard it is to get soil out of a hole. It's not, people worried about animals digging them up and things like that. But so changing people's opinions on kind of those things about what it is to be buried, and those things don't happen, I think is an important thing for us. The other, I think, misconception is around there's very much this kind of argument between ashes and burials about which is more environmental. And I do think it's possible to make any funeral more environmental. If you really want a cremation, you can make it better by, having a natural coffin and things like that. It doesn't have to be one way or the other. But the misconception that ashes are still very nutrient good for the soil, and actually in a way ashes are, they're very nutrient dense. We don't do ashes scatterings in our main area at all, because ashes actually, I think, as I understand it, they increase the nutrients too much. And so what they do is they discourage the growth of kind of the bluebells and things that we want. And they encourage the growth of nettles and brambles. So on all the lovely graves, we don't do any ashes scatterings over there. And we always inter ashes, if we're interring them, separate to the tree, because tree roots actually grow away from ashes. But there's some really interesting work that I'm reading up on about how to make ashes more, bioavailable to the soil. So there's some really interesting stuff there. And also the misconceptions around cost. I mean, our burial ground is fairly affordable, and when you compare it directly to kind of a cremation, it can be really affordable. And I think people often think that it's more expensive to be buried, and it can be massively more expensive in places like London, where it costs like £7,000 for a grave. But there are some really affordable natural burial grounds, and what people often don't think is that they have the ashes interment and everything there, and then they want to inter the ashes. So then they come to a natural burial ground and then want to inter the ashes, which then will increase the cost, because they then have to pay for a plot and the ashes interment. So actually, if you build it all into one, sometimes the cost can be even less for a burial than it is for a cremation, even though people feel that it's often the other way around. So talking about our vision and why we do things kind of the way we do our burial grounds. So we very much see natural burial as the future of burial at the moment. We see it as it is about the burial, but what it is about creating this natural environment, and it is the preservation of that piece of land for future generations. It's more than just burying people. We are constantly looking into how you actually build a woodland, how you grow a woodland. It's not just as simple as just planting trees. It's in a natural woodland, trees talk. They have like stuff underground. I can't think what it's called. I can't think of the word. Underground, like networks where they all talk to each other. They support each other. So it's really interesting when you think, oh, let's just plant some trees. You know, we need to have the right spacing. We need to have the right trees. We need to think about how they're growing. So it is a bigger feel. I feel the way we're personally doing it is one of the best. You can get natural burial grounds where you do burials in like places where it's already grown with trees, which obviously is lovely, but in some ways, perhaps, is it the best things for the trees there because you're digging up the roots? You're breaking down those networks of fungi underground by kind of cutting into them. So actually, by starting with nothing and building the woodland, trying to replicate kind of a natural progression, I feel is a better way of doing it, and potentially one of the best. And there is some kind of, the other thing, there's a lot of greenwashing around, you know, natural burials. And so when people ask me, you know, is every natural burial ground the same? They're not, because I mean, we have an association called the Association of Natural Burial Grounds. So anyone who's part of that should have signed up to certain things, but things you're thinking about when you're planning natural burial grounds, such as making sure that the graves are the right distance apart, that the trees are the right trees, as in they've got enough space to grow. You're not making them kind of in rows. You're making them as natural as you possibly can. These are the things that I find, you know, really interesting, and not just about not just about the burials, how we're actually creating this piece of land for the future. On our ground at the moment, we're doing a very exciting project for meadows. For those of you who don't know, Kent has obviously lost a lot of meadows recently, or in the past years. I think the UK has lost about 95% of its meadows, and meadows are very important habitats. But that's another thing that's really interesting. Some other burial grounds perhaps talk about, oh, we're putting some seeds down, we're making a meadow. It's a very complex process to make a meadow. And so it's working. It's a 7-year process basically to start making a meadow. So that's another thing we kind of think about. How can we put all these things together and make the burial ground more than just a burial ground, basically. So I think that's pretty much about it. Unless if there's any questions, I'd happily take them. But I hope what you've taken away is kind of how natural burials really a bigger thing than just, being buried in a woods.
Thank you. Thanks, Amy. I was just going to say, if anyone has got any questions, if anyone wanted to either, I can see that Mariana said that she definitely wants to have a natural burial now. If she dies in the UK, she's here at the moment. But
I say there are some natural burial grounds cropping up. I think the UK is one of the leaders probably in natural burial, but there are, I think, part of the AMBG. There's one in Holland now.
Okay.
We actually had someone come over to do some training, trying to set up one in New Zealand. But yes, I think the UK has, there's more natural burial grounds than anywhere really.
Yeah. Oh, someone's put, sorry, there is someone in the queue and I need to get used to the, right, someone's put a question. So Beck G has said, I'm interested in the legality for you starting out. How did you acquire the land and set up your business at the start?
Yeah, so our I don't know whether you're based in the UK, but so our land was greenbelt land, which in the UK can only be used for certain purposes. So we worked with the landowner. We don't own the land ourselves. We work with the landowner and the Natural Death Centre charity, which is a charity that helps support people through bereavements, to get the planning permission through for the land. And the idea, most natural burial grounds that are set up well in the UK are set up similar to this. So they tend to be set up either ownership or on a lease for the site. And then what would happen is when that lease comes to an end, which for ours is about 99 years, then the land would be handed over to someone like the Woodland Trust. So it was a process of getting the planning permission in, obviously, for the natural burial ground, and the legalities around of the green belt, because it is green belt. It was, you know, that's one of the only uses that you can really get through. So it was about a 5-year process, to be honest, to get it from the initial thought of it being that to us being able to open as a woodland burial ground. It wasn't a quick process, but that was the first time obviously we were part of it. So if we ever did it again, I hope that it would be less labor intensive, I'd hope.
Did you have to, I'm just intrigued, did you have to sort of speak to the people in the local area as well?
Yeah, there was some opposition. There was we had to do some consultations. We weren't doing that ourselves. This was the landowner doing that. But there was some consultation. There was a bit of opposition, but I think what people have learned is actually, I mean, there's a lot of greenbelt land near me going to housing at the moment. And actually people have realised what we're doing is saving a piece of land. We tend to have maybe 3 funerals a week. I mean, most funerals, even though obviously we allow people all the time they want, most funerals are only about an hour with about 30 cars. So I think people have started to appreciate that actually it's a great thing to have in their local area, and they really like it. And actually we found at the beginning the tables have kind of turned a bit, and now we get a lot of local support. And people really like us being there because we bring in local industry as well. You know, people hire local people to do we kind of have pop-up tea and coffee. We have a fish and chip van come in, and we try and give the business locally using the local halls if we need to. So I think it's been a great advantage to the local community, even though at first I think people were a little bit concerned. There were concerns and there were people who both ways. But now I think that we've managed to integrate ourselves quite well in the local community.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, no, because it's even for funeral directors, people just sort of sometimes if a funeral director pops up on the high street, they don't want to.
I know. Yes, completely. Oh, and it's a long process, and also getting funeral directors to trust you as well.
Yeah, of course.
Because obviously you want, you know, they don't want to recommend something they don't know about. So the first year was a lot about building relationships.
And I can highly recommend you because I'm a funeral, as you know, I'm a funeral director, and we have used you, and it's amazing. It's a beautiful. I haven't actually been there yet, but
one day you
can come down. But
but no, it is, and it's nice working with those funeral. And I think once funeral directors feel that they can trust you, it's a kind of, you know, it's a changed. They know what they're doing. They've been there before, but it is a new thing in the local area because there wasn't really one around here, and so it is a different way of doing things. But I think that we've had a lot of positive support from the funeral directors as well, which has been wonderful.
That's brilliant. And so can I just ask, in case someone might be thinking it, so is it for I kind of say the word in perpetuity, forever, so no one can.
So I mean, who knows what's going to happen in like 1,000 years? But the idea is that it is, and we also do lots of there's the legalities in the UK law about burials anyway, which protects sites. There's the lease. There's also the right of burial. So we sell right of burials on plots. We don't put a limit. Some burial grounds do put a limit, like you can only have the right of burial this for 50 years or something. Ours, we don't put a limit on it. So basically, with a full burial, you can put ashes on top. So you actually have people who in 50 years might come back and say, I want to have my ashes now interred on that grave. I've got a right of burial for it. So it's, you know, it's a complete legal thing. So we feel we've kind of covered as much as we can to secure this piece of land as long as we can. And the hope is it will be a forest. And that, like I said, with the coppicing, that is giving it will be a managed woodland. And everyone who gets buried there as well, which I didn't say earlier, pays into something called a future land maintenance fund. And that trust sits there to be used in the future. So you can imagine we've done 500 burials. That's 500 times £20 is sitting there. So everyone in the future, we're going to have probably about 10,000 burials. So that money there will then also be supporting the site wherever it goes, whether it goes to the Woodland Trust, the Kent and Surrey Wildlife, whichever is the most appropriate person. But I mean, we're talking at the moment probably about 40, 50 years time. It'll be running for a while.
And I know you sort of gave a bit of an intro at the beginning about yourself, but did you ever think you'd be doing this?
So no, my husband actually he's a landscape architect, and he went back to do a second degree when we were about 30, and he and that's where he learned about it, because they were talking about how cemeteries were wasted space and how you had to have a second land use, and that's when natural burial came up. And then he called the naturalist and said, do you ever hear of anyone who wants you to run a natural burial ground? And they said, no, it's never happened. 2 weeks later, they called us up and said, we know someone who wants to work with someone with a natural burial ground. So it just happened like that. And then we moved to start the site. So it's funny how things happen. And my husband actually said, it was quite funny. He said, he used to work in an office with people, with
Yeah.
real people. And yeah,
People.
but then he said he never talked to as many people as he does working on the
No.
burial ground, because I think compared to a cemetery, I think what people don't realize is that lots of people in the funeral industry have a very short relationship with the family.
Mm.
And we have literally, from the first time someone's buried there, we will then see that person, like the first people who are buried there, we've now have a relationship with them over 6 years.
Yeah.
We see them while Martin's up there coming to have a chat. So there's a big difference in kind of how it is, because obviously you would never see your gravedigger at a normal cemetery. I mean, Martin gets invited to after parties, you know, he gets brought gifts. Like, it's a real kind of family orientated. Like, they've seen our children grow up, which you saw Jack in the photo, that was a long time ago. So yes, there's this is real relationship, which is quite a lot of pressure sometimes, to be honest, because you're trying to look after people for an extended period for like a very small amount of money, but that relationship is going to be, you know, potentially 30, 40 years you're going to have a relationship with them. And people's investment in the site as well is bigger than investing in a cemetery, because they're investing in this piece of land and they want to know you're doing the right thing by the piece of land. So that's quite an interesting angle on it. I don't think that we totally realized when we started. And you'll get people you never see again, but you will get the people you see week in, week out. We'll send you a Christmas card, you know. Yeah.
So yeah, no, I mean, it must be fascinating. And also, I suppose it's an area that, I mean, you can walk. I like walking around graveyards, but you can walk around graveyards. But it's an area which isn't, people can spend time and they can go and have a picnic or something in the summer.
Oh, completely. And that's what we encourage people to do. It's like, we have a lovely path that goes around. Most of the burial grounds have, you know, something they just walk around. We have a pond, we have bees, so people, you know, come and see those. We're trying to make it, at the moment, we're trying to make it a bit more interactive for people, as in we're trying to find making some sheets up so kids who visit can spot the trees and you know, give them that bigger understanding of nature. But yes, it definitely is something. And we say to people, and they're very funny sometimes, they always call us, say, oh, can I visit? And that's we're like, you can visit anytime you want. You can literally come anytime. You don't have to ask me, you can come. But often you'll get people, oh, Amy, can I come and see the site? Yes, you can come. Please come and use the site. That's what it's there for.
Is it literally open? Is there not a shutting and an opening time of it?
Well, we say dawn to dusk, really.
Yes, of course.
Is when, you know, but yeah, but outside that, there's we have a lock on the gate, which has got, so it's a padlocked gate that has anyone who's buried there gets the combination. And then the idea is, they can just show up when they want. And if they really wanted to come at, you know, 8 o'clock at night for some reason, then they will tell us and we'll say yes. As long as you're not disturbing the neighbours, you know.
Of course.
We wouldn't encourage any, you know, parties up there. But yeah, I mean, I think the place is supposed to be a celebration. It's supposed to be an enjoyment, and kids to come and play. And we often have kids, a very big part of funerals there. They do the backfilling. One of my favourite, can you have a favourite funeral? It sounds very strange, doesn't it? But favourite funeral was a lady called Ingrid, and she was a lady who we named the first area after. And she had a lovely funeral. It was complete DIY. The family carried the coffin. Everyone was backfilling the grave. And at the end of it, I think it was probably about our 5th or 6th funeral. So I'd never seen anything like this in my life. And the grave was kind of mounded up as you do. And there's literally like children playing on top of the grave, her grandchildren. And it was absolutely fascinating. And it was a real celebration, which I know funerals can't always be, because they're not always celebrations, because, you know, there's deep sadness with a lot of funerals. But that was just like, that was a real turning point, I think, in my understanding of what a funeral could be. And it was very much led by the family. And that's, I think, and I spoke to the daughter recently, actually. And just saying to her that funeral really inspired how I looked at it, because it's one thing to be told this is how it is, because obviously I've never done the funerals before, but to actually see it and see how they interpreted the funeral, it was really amazing and a real learning curve.
And I was going to say, also was with your own children, did it? So have they grown up? Were they already born before you? I can't remember.
So one of them was. So Jack was born, but I mean, he's very much a part of he comes to the tree planting. They come up the burial ground all the time.
So they fully understand what it all.
Yeah, they do. They've been at funerals. They've helped dig the graves. They've helped backfill. Yeah, it was quite interesting. There was some interesting stuff when Jack was younger and used to try and dig a grave in a sandpit. I used to be slightly embarrassed in front of the other parents at, like, you know, at Godstone Farm or something. But yeah, in general, so I do have to tell people, you know, he is quite used to this. But yes, it's really interesting growing up in that kind of environment, I think, for children, and seeing it. And yeah, whenever we talk about someone, the first question is, are they dead? And I'm like, no, they're not dead. But it's nice, I think. And I think that, yeah, I hope it doesn't cause any problems for them. I hope it gives them a real understanding of what it is. And also, I mean, the big thing for them is the environmental stuff. I think them understanding that our job is helping people and is helping them have the burial they want, and also protecting the environment and protecting this land for their future.
It must help as well for them to understand the process of death from, you know, like, because you're going back to the land, the ground, rather than a more sort of clinical approach.
Yeah, no, I think so. And they've seen, you know, they see coffins, they've seen everything. I don't think anything would be scary for them. And I think I think children and funerals is a really interesting one. And I've seen it work both ways, to be honest. I've seen it be really bad, and I've seen it be really good. And I don't necessarily know how you achieve either of those. But I hope for them that they, you know, luckily we haven't had it happen to our family, you know, anyone that we would know or be close to, that they would have that experience yet of actually losing someone. But I hope that they can have a better understanding of it, because they've seen it and seen that, you know, funerals can be beautiful and natural and you know, live on by something else you're creating, which is very much what we want people to think, that, you know, they are, by being buried somewhere like Eden Valley, you are creating a piece, you are protecting something for the future. And we try and make people think when they come there, like, this is it's not just about their plot, it's about this piece of land. It's not just about, you know, even though it always is about the plot, because that's where your loved one is buried, but it is about this land preservation for the future. This is what you're doing. And I think, yeah, I'm hoping that the kids might be, you know, we'll see
what's going into the industry.
Wow, I mean, Jack wants to be a gravedigger, so
okay. But it's good exercise. It's
should I tell you what, digging graves in clay is very good exercise. Yeah,
my partner, we had the only closest I've got to is one of our cats died, and my partner dug in the garden, and he said it was such hard work. So
we had one where Martin wasn't very well, and he said, can I do it? And it was in the middle of the summer, and so clay bakes. So you have a very short window in clay when it's actually nice to dig a grave. And so so the clay bakes. And I remember him giving me the pickaxe, and I lifted it up, and then I tried to hit the ground, and it just bounced back off. And he looked at me, he was like, I'm gonna have to do it, aren't you? And I was like, I'm gonna try. I just couldn't do it. But I'm better at backfills I can handle. The actual grave digging is quite a skill, to be honest.
Well, definitely, I say, make sure it doesn't come in on you as well, don't you?
Yeah, that's why we do, because of the depth. So we don't do the depth far enough to shore up. But I mean, it is a real skill to make it a nice grave. And it's I never quite realized I'd appreciate graves. I've turned into a bit of a grave snob, to be honest. When they kind of, you know, dug with machine, I'm like, oh, it's just not the same.
The machine just looks so, I mean, it's also the machine in the graveyard looks so horrible.
And it's the traps,
they were hovering with it.
Well, yeah, and it's just funny, because just the cleanness of the sides and the beauty, it's just really beautiful. Like, the graves he digs are really lovely. And and when you have just like a hole kind of scraped out in the earth, and I think that's part of, if people see natural burials, like, part of the fear of going into the ground is, you know, see these cavernous holes that you're lowered into. Whereas actually, I've been in a lot of graves, the kids have been in a lot of graves, it's actually a really nice environment in there. They're great for childcare, because, you know, you can just keep hold of the child.
Well, playpen, you
can't go anywhere.
Great.
But yeah, it is. I mean, it is nice. And funny enough, we have had people, when there has been it's like, oh, can I just, you know, can I see it? Can I, you know, see what it's like? And I think once you see it, it's like, oh, actually, it's okay.
It would be quite nice to see it before as well, because it's that thing of the first time you see it when the coffin's lowered in, for some people that might be sort of more difficult than if they'd sort of come to terms with it or I don't know. It's different.
And we do encourage people, like we had some lovely burials, unfortunately, for, you know, younger people, and they've put like feathers at the bottom of the grave, and we've had people put bits from their garden at the bottom of the grave, because at certain times of year, obviously, when it's, you know, more wet and muddy, it can feel different. But we always encourage, or like in the autumn, to lay, you know, we will lay the grave with leaves if they want to, or something to make it feel that little bit softer, for anyone who does feel, you know, that, you know, they just need a bit more. But I mean, I really like it when people bring bits from their garden and put them on the bottom of the graves. I think that's a really nice thing to do, kind of encase them in their own things.
And are there things you probably did say it in your talk as well, but are there things that you can't I mean, obviously, so with clothes and things, it just has to be the person's dressed in. It has to be.
So we say, I mean, if you are 100%, we say it's, cotton, wool, etc., etc. But I mean, clothing is something that kind of, it will biodegrade over time. It's not gonna be nasty for the soil, but obviously you can't bury like batteries and anything that's going to leach into the soil. So, but yeah, we are more. But if people say to us, "What is the best I can do?" Then we say, "This is the best you can do. You can get a cotton slip, or you can either just get wrapped in a sheet." But like I said, because clothing is quite important. But also in the coffin, you are allowed to put natural things in. So you can put in kind of letters, and you can put in stones or crystals, or things like that as well.
And have you had any burials where it's been just in the shroud? Have you had?
Yeah, we've actually had one where it was a complete DIY.
Oh yeah,
and she was just in a blanket, and that was it, because it was one where they did order a coffin to be delivered to us, and I said to them, it might not come in time, like you have to wait. And they managed to get here early. They looked after her at home. We'd managed to turn it around really quickly, and they literally just said, we're just ready to do it now.
And is that the one they brought in the car?
No, that was in a coffin. That was a DIY in a coffin. But but this was just one where because as long as you cover someone, you can move them in the car. So so they just literally did it in a blanket. But yeah, we do use, I was listening to the lady earlier talking about the coffins and the reusable lid ones, because sometimes the shrouds come with those. Obviously, I think they're a really good idea. But the shrouds, we've seen a lot of shrouds. And lovely, was it Bella Couche?
Yes,
shrouds. We had our first one ever the other day. I was very excited.
We have got because we should have in the expo area. We've got a booth for them. But
for Bella Couche.
Yeah, but they were gonna. It's with the felted ones.
Yes, exactly. Embroidery.
She's moving, so studio, so she couldn't actually come this time. But next year we'll get her along to do an.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen that. I haven't ever seen one until about 3 weeks ago. But I do know someone who's buying one themselves and actually buying one of theirs, and then it's spending their time embroidering it before they die, which is quite nice.
Yeah, that's really nice.
But yeah, shrouds is fine as well. So basically, anything that's environmental like that is totally fine.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Well, I mean, we're sort of coming up to the time, but I don't know if anyone else has got any questions that they wanted to ask. You can put in the chat, or I think probably we've covered lots of things. I mean, you can always, all your details are in the in your booth anyway, so that if anyone wants to get in touch with you, then they can.
Yes, of course, and we're always happy to answer other questions about anything we can do to help.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, well, thank you so much.
No problem. I'll look forward to listening to some of the other talks. Brilliant. Thanks so much for organising, Victoria.
Thank you
everyone for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.